So have you ever heard of a town that got a second chance, like a whole town, not just a building or a block?
Sounds like a story. What are we diving into this time?
Well, it's more than a story. It's a deep dive into NC and their ambitious plan. They're tackling these huge issues like housing insecurity, lack of opportunity, and they're doing it all with this fascinating focus on faith and revitalization.
NC. G-R-E-I-N-C.
Yeah, it stands for New Chapter God.
Yeah.
They want to create this community, a place for struggling Americans and immigrants to land on their feet again, a fresh start.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where does this new chapter actually take place?
All right, so picture this, Henry River Mill Village. It's this abandoned mill town, kind of eerie but beautiful in a way, Empty buildings, nature reclaiming the streets, and a stark reminder of how things change, how quickly a place can just be forgotten.
Wow, I can see why that would be a powerful image.
Right. And that's exactly what NC Kagod INC is tapping into. This idea of breathing new life into something that's been left behind. They're not just building new housing. They're talking about restoring what's already there.
Almost like a parallel to the transformation they see for the people they want to help.
Exactly. It's symbolic, right? A new chapter for the town, for the people. And honestly, it's the kind of narrative that really packs an emotional punch, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely. It speaks to a certain audience, a certain set of values. And let's be real, with a name like New Chapter God, it's clear they're weaving faith into their message.
Yeah, and that actually leads to a pretty thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
In their fundraising appeal, they quote the Bible, saying you must take care of your own household first before taking care of others.
Interesting.
So how do you interpret that?
Hmm.
When we talk about taking care of our own, especially in today's world, who are we really talking about?
It's a huge question, right? And one that sparks endless debates. Does focusing on those closer to home mean turning a blind eye to global needs? Or is it about building a strong foundation here so we can better help others in the long run?
It's complex, that's for sure. But I have to give NC Government INC credit for putting it out there. They're not afraid to touch on potentially controversial topics.
And that's what makes their choice of Henry River Mill Village even more interesting. It's not just an empty plot of land, right? They're picking a place steeped in history, a place that represents a very particular image of America.
It's a statement, for sure. Like they're saying they want to reclaim something that's been lost, not just create something new. It makes you think differently about progress.
And it definitely adds another layer of complexity to their mission.
Yeah, I mean, on one hand, you're working with something that's already there. You've got the bones of a town, maybe even some remnants of essential services. It's a lot easier to reimagine something when you have a starting point, right?
Right, it's not a blank slate, but then you have to think about the other side of that coin. Oh, absolutely. Renovations, bringing everything up to code, and who knows what kind of environmental stuff they might have to deal with from the town's past. Those are some serious hurdles to overcome.
And the logistics of it all, right?
Sure.
Getting contractors out to what I imagine is a pretty remote location, transporting materials, it all adds up.
No doubt. It makes you wonder, what are the demographics they're targeting? Who would relocate to a revitalized Henry River Mill Village?
It's a good question.
Mm.
And it makes their emphasis on a holistic approach even more important. They talk about job creation, social support services, a real focus on empowering immigrants. It's a lot to unpack.
Ambitious, for sure. I'm curious to see how they plan to create a sustainable community. Are we talking about attracting new industries or focusing on local businesses to support the residents?
Yeah. What kind of jobs are we actually talking about here? And is there a long-term plan to ensure economic stability? Because providing housing is one thing, but creating a thriving community requires more than just putting a roof over people's heads.
Right, you need that economic foundation. Otherwise, it becomes completely dependent on outside support, which isn't sustainable in the long run.
Exactly. And that's where their emphasis on social support services comes in. Because for a lot of the people Gotti INC is trying to help, simply having a job might not be enough.
You're talking about breaking cycles, right? Poverty, lack of education, limited access to healthcare, those are deep-rooted issues that require more than just a paycheck.
And it gets even more layered when you think about their core message of taking care of your own. They're trying to balance that idea with this focus on empowering immigrants.
It's an interesting juxtaposition, right? Like they're trying to weave together these ideas of national identity and welcoming newcomers and doing it all within this framework of revitalizing a very specific image of small town America.
It's like they're trying to create a microcosm of a society they want to see, but on this small scale.
Exactly. They're taking a stand on some pretty divisive issues, and I have a feeling their approach is going to attract both praise and criticism.
Oh, for sure. But you have to admit, they're asking some important questions. Questions about social responsibility, about how faith and national identity play into our responses to these big issues. It gets you thinking. It really makes you think about the potential impact, though. Imagine if they actually pull this off.
Right. If they can create a thriving community in Henry River Mill Village, it could be a model for other struggling towns.
It's like a whole new approach to rural development,
Right.
Instead of just trying to attract big businesses, they're focusing on building from within, tapping into the existing character of these places.
But that brings up another question. Can you really replicate something like this? Every town is different, with its own unique history and challenges.
And its own economic realities, too. Because, let's be real, this whole thing hinges on financial sustainability. We haven't really touched on their funding model, have we?
That's a big piece of the puzzle. Are they relying solely on donations? Because if that's the case, it's going to be tough to create any kind of long-term stability.
Exactly. They'd be constantly beholden to outside forces, which could compromise their vision down the line. And that doesn't even touch on the whole issue of tying social goods so closely to specific religious or national identities.
Right. It raises questions about who this model is really designed to help. Can something like this truly serve a diverse community, or does it inherently create divisions, even as it tries to build something new?
It's a lot to grapple with. And honestly, I think that's what makes this whole story so fascinating. NCGIDINC is forcing us to confront some really complex issues, things we often try to avoid talking about.
They're challenging us to think critically about social responsibility, about the role of faith and national identity in shaping our responses to these challenges. And they're doing it all through this really tangible, concrete project.
Which, let's be honest, is way more engaging than just reading statistics or policy papers. Sometimes it takes a story like this, something with a little bit of hope and a lot of heart, to get people to really pay attention.
Absolutely. And hopefully that attention translates into action, because at the end of the day, it's not enough to just talk about these issues. We need people to get involved, to find ways to make a difference in their own communities.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's my takeaway. Whether you agree with their approach or not, NCGIGOEINC is sparking a conversation. They're getting people to think about housing insecurity, about economic opportunity, about what it really means to take care of each other. And those are conversations worth having, even if they're uncomfortable sometimes.
Couldn't agree more. It's not about finding easy answers. It's about asking the tough questions, challenging our own assumptions, and ultimately finding ways to create a more just and equitable world. And who knows, maybe Henry River Mill Village will show us that even in the most unexpected of places, a new chapter is possible.
A new chapter for a town, for a community, and maybe even for our own understanding of what it means to be a part of something bigger than ourselves.